All right, so last time we learned a little bit about input fields and switch statements and stuff like that. Let's go with a complex idea or concept, but a pretty easy programming way to implement it through code. And it's this concept which is called an array. Now, an array is, you can think about it as a variable, but with a variable, you can store a single element. So, like, you might have a variable called name, and it can hold a string of letters, and that name could be whatever you enter, just kind of like what we did here. But with an array, it's good for storing collections of types, variable types, so like a bunch of integers, things like that. Right now, this is all word salad until we get into it. So let's go ahead and delete their canvas here. And I'm going to right click and go to UI and then just make a fresh Text Mesh Pro object. And this, we'll just kind of expand it out and then we'll increase the font size. And what I'm thinking a good way to show you is we're going to create an array of words. And those words will be foods. And as you hit the space bar, it'll just cycle through each element in the array. And I think that'll be a good way to teach you about how arrays and arrays work. And this is something you'll use for an inventory in a video game, things like that. Or if you need to cycle through players or you need to store where all the enemies are in a game, an array could be a good thing to use for it. So there's a bunch of examples, but the whole point of this is just so you understand the concept of arrays. And then as time moves on, you do other tutorials, you'll see an array come up again. Like I said, in an inventory system or whatever. All right, so in your scripts folder, right click and then create another C# script and just call this array example. And I'm going to grab this and I'm just going to drop it on top of my canvas once it's finished doing its thing. And I'm going to go ahead and double click this and open this up. Now, once this opens, I need a link to my TextMesh Pro object here. So let's go ahead and script that out. Come on, array example. There we go. Okay. Oh, it looks like it's going all over the place. All right, so let's close these scripts out, which we had before. And let's go public text mesh pro UGUI, and we'll call this text box. And then we'll do a private, and I'll show you the difference between a private and public array. It'll be of a string, and we'll call this foods. Make it equal to apple. My typing is off, comma. And we'll use a grape. And I don't know, cherry. Notice that I have a comma in between each one, but not at the end. So let's go in and take a look. So we want to, on our canvas, we want to grab this TextMesh Pro object here. Now remember, we made it private, our array, right? So I'm going to hit Control S to save this, but I made a private array, and so we don't see it here. But look what happens when I make it public. Let's see, I'm going to change it from private to public here, and I'm going to save that, and I'll go ahead and click on this. So you can see I get the name of my array, foods, and when I expand it, you can see I have at element 0. This is important. See how it doesn't start with element 1? It starts with the number 0. These are slots or a list of those things that we created, right? These apple, grape, and cherry, and they start at slot 0, 1, and 2. Even though there's 3 elements in my array, the slot starts with 0. So I can actually add a 4th one in here by hitting that plus sign. So you see how it opened it? And I can make this, I don't know, hummus, because I love hummus, even though it's not a fruit, it is a food. Okay, but say I want to access element 0, right? Which is apple. How do you do that, right? Well, we can say, let's just start it in text. We could say text box dot text equals foods. And just like we have these brackets here, 0. And let's see if when I press play, if that updates in our scene to food. There's apple. Okay, well, what if we change that to 1? And we press play. It should give us grapes. And remember, we added this hummus here. Remember, public, anything that's public, the editor kind of supersedes what's in there. So if we go back here and I change this to 4, even though there's only 3 elements in here, this is an important concept inside of Unity. Let's see if it gives us hummus. It does not, right? It says index is out of, oh no, because we're supposed to be at 3. Index is out of range, right? Because we have 4 objects, but we only have 4 elements. So I made that mistake. So let's make this 3, because 0, 1, 2, 3. And that's good that we got that. And it should give us hummus. There we go, hummus. So this supersedes anything that's inside of there. Okay, let me go ahead and pause the script, and then I'm just going to type up a bunch of very basic code in the input field. And what it's going to do is as I hit the space bar, it'll cycle through. But I'm also going to comment this out for now, just so I'm starting with the one that's in the scene. All right, so I did some changes, and I don't want you to get scared, but I made a variable here that's private that's called current index, and it's starting at 0. And you probably guessed why. I'm going to use this to, I'm going to increment this to 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So every time I hit the space bar, I'm going to change this value. And the reason for that is I want to be able to cycle through each element in my array. So inside my update function, I have this if statement here. Now, if my input dot get key down is my space bar. Okay, so I'm going to save this. This might be a little confusing, but like you might be like, well, what is space? What is all this nonsense? Well, actually, what this does is this is a pre-made code, and all it's saying is the input from your keyboard or whatever, and the key that we want is a key code, and key code just means ABC or whatever, and that's the space bar. If I press that, textbox.text, we've already done that, equals the first element, which is 0 in our foods. Then I'm going to increment it by 1. This is the same way as saying current index equals current index plus 1. This is shorthand. If you just write current index plus plus. So that's kind of like saying that. Then we're going to have another if statement. If you're not familiar with if statements really just run only if something is true. So if we press our space bar, we're going to print to the screen the first element, which is apple. Then we're going to add 1 to this. And then we're going to say this. Is the current index, which is set at 1 at this point, greater than or equal to the foods.length? Right? Well, what is the food.length? Food.length is different than foods.index. Foods.length means we have 1, 2, 3, and then we have a 4th element. And here's the thing. If it is greater than that number, we want to set it back to 0 so we keep looping through every time we hit the space bar. So let's save this. And let's go back to Unity. And let's press play and see if this works. So I'm going to hit spacebar. Now we are at 0. Grape, cherry, hummus, apple. So this is just a way to teach you a little bit about getting input from the keyboard and how to go through certain elements in an array and how elements of an array work. That's it. I think that's a pretty good basic understanding. Again, research arrays, Google them, run through this video. Make sure you're not only taking notes, but you're typing and following along as we go through this.